All right, welcome back to another episode of Bear Track Outfitters podcast. It's been a while. Things have been hectic since for the last few months, so I haven't been able to post anything for a while now. So throwing up today. Yeah, I know I got my Patriots hat on. Disappointing year, but whatever. It is what it is, and hopefully next year's better. But anyway, enough of that. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about how to bait bears. I've been asked to do this for quite a while by a lot of people. And it's a topic I can obviously talk at length about. But I'll try to keep it short today. I'll try to keep it to the basics. Obviously, there's nuances and there's details that I could talk forever on, but I'll try to keep it to the basics. So if anyone's looking to start a bait, this is kind of a good stepping off point. If someone has any questions or comments, obviously send them in. You can either email them or just comment it below in the video, and we can talk, we can chat. My way certainly isn't the only way. There's a lot of ways to do it. This is over the years of guiding and outfitting. I've found that this has certainly been good for us and worked for us. And given us the success we have. So yeah, let's dive in. Like I said, I'll try to keep it short. I'll try to just touch on the basics. And if there's anything that I didn't address that you want to hear about or you'd like to know more about, please just leave a comment and I'll address it. So when you're looking to set up a bait, there's a few things that have to come into consideration, and one of them being prevailing winds. Now, this is one that most guys or most people that want to start baiting for bears don't think about. They don't think about the prevailing wind. So, say you have a piece of property you want to set up a bear bait on, and here in the spring, it's a majority of the days is a somewhat south wind, which is, I think, pretty common. So what I'm going to do when I set up my bait, I'm not going to pick an area where the time of year where I want those bears to pick up the scent of my bait and to really hone in and find my bait site. That prevailing wind is blowing right towards a town or a suburb or something, right? So when you set up your bait, and you know that let's say you want to hunt them majority in the spring, you know that in spring the prevailing wind is a south wind. I'm going to set up my bait so that wind pushes the scent of my bait towards the big woods, towards the bush, towards where the bears are, right? So if you have your property and your bait, and let's say this way is here's north, here's south, wind is blowing this way, right? It's coming this way, but you have a town right here. Well, try to go on the other side, right? You don't want the wind pushing your bait right into town where the bears aren't. So I hope that makes sense. If I was tech savvy enough, I'd have some sort of fancy diagram and map up on the screen here to show you. But basically, when you set up your bait, ensure that the prevailing wind for that time of year is going to be pushing the scent of your bait towards where the bears are. Okay, that's a common one. Cover's a big one. Bears generally, they don't like open areas. They don't like, you'll find them on cut roads, and you'll find them, every once in a while they cross the road. So it's not like they avoid open areas at all costs, but But if they can, they do not like open areas. What I've found works best is where you get that transition between softwoods and the hardwoods. So I set up a bait last year. We called it Buffalo Trace after one of my favorite bourbons. So it is literally on the edge of a bunch of pines and a whack load of poplars. So they can kind of lurk in amongst those pine trees, and it provides them the cover to kind of lurk around, to slink around, and kind of go undetected. Where they feel like they're concealed. So when you're setting up your bait, take into consideration what the vegetation, what the cover and concealment looks like, not just around your bait area, but from where bears are traveling. Can they access your bait? Do they have to cross the field? Well, if they do, I wouldn't set up there. But is there a way where they can get in, they can kind of sneak into that bait, especially in the early stages of you setting this bait up? They're going to be cautious. They're going to be a little suspect that, this is a little too easy. And they're right, but you still want them to get comfortable, right? So when you set up your bait, set it up in an area where they can get in and out, just like a hunter, right? When you're hunting bear or whitetail, I'm not gonna, just trudge down the road. You want to sneak in, sneak out. A bear wants to do the same thing at the bait. They want to sneak in, they want to sneak out. And so your vegetation, your cover, your concealment, your surroundings, it has to allow them to do that. Hope that makes sense. Type of bait. Now, this one you could go on forever. I know what works for me. I'll say this. There's no one best bait. I don't care what anyone says. I've been baiting bears for 27 years. There is no best bait. There are baits that work better than others. But to say, if you do this, you're going to kill them. You're going to get big bears. You're going to get consistent, ton of bears, and you'll kill Boone and Crockett bears. Nonsense. For example, I tried something a few years ago up at Bear Track. So normally when we bait, I'll say it, I don't care. If you want to use the same thing as me, go for it. I wish you all the success in the world. I truly do. It's not a secret. I use trail mix, I use peanut butter, and I use gummy candies. And then we have a deal with, sponsorship deal with Northwoods Bear Products. Fantastic stuff. And so basically, we order it all by the ton, obviously. We have a couple semi-loads we order every year. And so that's what I use. I've used it for all my life almost. That's what I found works best for me for a number of reasons, and we'll get into that. But one year I figured I'm gonna try corn. It was during COVID. We weren't getting any hunters up, but I still wanted to run my baits because I'm not going to just let them sit dry for 2 years and then the first year hunters come up, fire them all up and cross my fingers and hope for the best, right? So I maintained all my baits throughout the 2 years we were shut down due to COVID. And so one year I'm like, man, so I go to order my bait and just logistics and you name it, due to COVID, they weren't allowed to ship into Canada. Beats me why, but that's what I was told. So, all right. So I contacted a local feed company in the area. And I was like, I've heard of other outfitters using corn. Let me try it. So I ordered tons of it. Filled up all my barrels with corn. for the first maybe week, they'd mess around with it. They'd eat a little bit of it. They'd tip the barrels over. They'd roll them around. They'd do this and that. But after that, they would not touch it. They would not touch it. I had barrels of corn go bad because the bears would not touch it. 100 miles east of me, there's another outfitter I know. That's all he uses. That's all he's ever used is corn, and he kills them. So when I hear people go, "Oh, you have to use this. You have to," no, you don't. You use what works. Use what works for you. Find what works for you. It's there's not one way to do things. You'll hear a lot of people how do I put this? They always look for the next best thing, right? They're going to try something. Oh, yeah, but if I just tweak this and add this and change this and take this out, right? It's like some sort of recipe they're trying to create with a bait. Don't fall into that trap. I'm telling you, it's a trap. It's a trap in the sense that you always think the grass is greener, but it never is. And here's why. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. The two biggest things when it comes to baiting for bears is comfort and consistency. If you can establish those two, it doesn't matter what you're baiting with. The bears need to feel comfortable coming in. Like I said, with cover, with sense, right? Because when you're always looking for that new flavor, that new recipe, that new thing that this is going to bring in the biggest bears. And then it doesn't. So next year you change it up, or next week you change it up, next month you change it up. This will bring in the bigger bears. And what you're doing is you're constantly changing scents. You're constantly introducing a new scent into that bait now. How are they ever supposed to get comfortable with that? They won't. They can't. Because, it smells like anise. Next day it smells like vanilla. Next week it smells like molasses. It's like, okay, pick something. Because all three of those work. I know they do. So pick one. Stop changing the scents. Stop changing, because you change the whole atmosphere of that bait now. So again, like a guy I know uses corn. I use trail mix. We both kill bears. He's tried trail mix. Didn't really do much. I tried corn. Did nothing. Right? Meanwhile, he swears by corn and I swear by trail mix. So your area has a lot to do with the bait you use and how effective it'll be. And it also, I've used trail mix for so long, the bears know what that is. They know it's there. They know it's food. They're used to it. So don't get caught trying to change recipes, because all you're doing is hindering your long-term success. If you have a bait formula, let's call it that, excuse me, and you're bringing in bears, you found it. That's it. If you're bringing in bears and they're sticking around, you got it. That's the formula. Right? Give it time. I was talking to a guy a while back, and he fell into this trap. He's like, oh, yeah, bears, I just wasn't getting any big bears on there. Okay. How do you know it's because of your bait? How do you know that? Are there big bears in the area? You might just be in a shitty area. Right? What's your bear population? Do you know? And I asked him, I said, how long have you been running your bait? He says 3 weeks. That's not near long enough to have any sort of certainty of what your bait can and cannot produce, bear-wise. Not even close. I give my baits, when I set up a new bait personally, or for bear track, I give it a year. before I make any sort of call whether this bait is worth running or not. So 3 weeks is nothing. I says, are you bringing bears into your bait? He goes, yep. I says, are they coming and just kind of nosing around, munching a little bit and leaving and you never see them again? Or do they come consistently, and when they come, they're there for a bit? He says, oh no, when they come, they stick around. And I've seen the same bears on my bait multiple times. I said, there you go. Then just keep doing what you're doing. Because it's working. And you know what? You keep that bait established. You keep that bait fresh. Don't let it run dry. You keep that bait going. Eventually, you probably will, more than likely, have a big Bruin walk through. It's just a matter of time. 3 weeks is not even close to enough time to decide whether or not this is working. So don't fall into that trap. Just if you're bringing bears into your bait and they're consistently coming in, and when they come they're sticking around, that's all you need. You got them. Then just keep doing what you're doing, and then so now you've got the comfort. Now, you get with that consistency. You bait the same time, every time. I don't care if it's once a day, once every other day, once, twice a week. I don't care how often you bait, as long as you're not letting your bait run dry. But every time you go into bait, you go in at the same time. The same time. Because a bear will not only smell you were there, they will smell how long ago you were there. So now if I bait 10 o'clock, 9:30, 9:45, 10 o'clock, 9:50, 10:15, and then all of a sudden I bait at 2 o'clock, the bears go, whoa. What? Something changed here. What changed? Why is he here now, right? Now you're going to throw that comfort off. Your inconsistency is going to make them uncomfortable. So consistency makes them comfortable. You need those two. Okay. What do I look for when I kind of talked about what I look for when I look to set up a bait. Another thing I look for is bear, obviously bear sign. I look for bear trails, and they're different from whitetail trails. Most people may know this or not, but a bear trail you can distinguish from any other trail because they not only do they take the same path every time, they'll step in the same footprint every time. So you'll see these foot indentations, and that's a good sign you got a bear trail. And then from there, determine how heavily traveled it is, and etc. So I look for that. I look for bite marks in the trees when a boar is in rut. He'll get up and he'll rub on that tree like this, and he'll reach around and he'll bite on the tree, right? If I see any of those, I'll just keep my eye for stuff like that. I'll look for signs of what's called straddle marking. What straddle marking is a boar will find a sapling or a small tree, and they'll kind of walk over it. They'll straddle it, and they'll bend it over, and as they do, they urinate on it, right in the tree. And they'll do that more than once, and other boars will do it as well. It's kind of like a scrape for a whitetail. That's a bear's version of a whitetail scrape. They'll straddle mark these saplings. So I look for stuff like that. On top of what I said earlier about the kind of area once I find the kind of area that I think looks berry, if I can put it that way, I'll look for these bite marks, these straddle markings, bear trails. I start very vague with what I look for, and once I find a nice area, I'll kind of get more detail oriented, and that's how I'll narrow down where I set up my bait. How to set up my barrel. Now again, this, like anything in hunting, there's no one way to do it. I have my way. I know other people that do theirs. I think it depends solely on two things. How many bears do you have in your area? And how many bait sites do you plan on running? So if you have a very, very bear heavy area and you plan on running multiple baits, I generally tell people to stay away from the typical, you strap your barrel to the tree upright and you just big hole in the middle. I'm not a fan of that one. If you're running your own bait, just one bait, and you want to do it that way, fill your boots, right? I get it. But I'm generally not a fan of that for a number of reasons. One, I have yet to find one where it doesn't get waterlogged, and then your bait turns to mushy shit in there, and then the bears generally don't like it. It doesn't take them long to clean it out. So unless you got a pretty high bait budget, like I said, if you got a lot of bears and you're running more than one, you better be willing to spend some money on some bait because they're going to clean that out pretty quick. Two, I feel I've noticed that when you have a bait like that, it doesn't allow for a lot of bears to be on the bait at the same time. So here's what I mean by that. So the way we do it at Bear Track, and the way I do it on my personal baits, is I take a metal 55-gallon drum, and I take a pickaxe, and I just bust holes all around the barrel, starting about a quarter of the way up. I won't do any on the bottom, because you dump your bait in and it all spills out. So quarter of the way up, and then I'll start kind of like a salt and pepper shaker. So there's little holes all around the barrel. Through the bottom, I'll punch a hole, and I run an eye bolt through the bottom, and I take washers, and then I two nuts, and then I run a cable, quarter-inch cable through that eye bolt, and then to a tree. So I stand the barrel up, fill it up. The bears can tip the barrel over, and then they have to roll that barrel around to get bait out. So they got to work for it. You have to be careful when you do this, though, that it's not too hard, because then they're just like, it's not worth it, and then they leave. So you kind of have to find that equilibrium, that balance, where they got to work for it, but they're still getting rewarded for the work, right? Because if they roll that thing around for an hour and they get a couple kernels of corn out of there, they're gonna leave, because that's not worth it. Bears are, which is the reason they go into their torpor, not actual hibernation, because it has nothing to do with weather. When they go into torpor, it's their calorie output has now exceeded their intake. And the same thing is for when they're at baits. If their input, trying to get this bait, is exceeding their intake, they're not going to bother. So you have to find that balance, right? And I've had to go back to a couple of my baits and poke more holes in it. And then because I've noticed, man, I go to freshen up the bait and there's still a lot in here. And you look at the camera and it's like, golly. Yeah, they come for a little bit and then they leave. So next time I went into bait, I brought it in my pickaxe and I just popped a few more holes in there. Next thing I go in there 2 days later and that barrel's empty. You pull the card and there's bears everywhere. So you kind of have to play around with it a little bit. So that's how I set up my barrel. I do it that way because, like I said, it keeps the bears around. I'm not blowing through enormous amounts of bait every week. I think I found the perfect balance between having a lot of bait in there and attracting a lot of bears and keeping the bears at the bait. So, again, that's just the way I do it. I'm not saying that's the best way. I found that's the way that works best for me. And so if like I said, with the holes, like I run 55 bait sites at Bear Track. If they all had those massive holes in there, I'd have to order 10 times the amount of bait I do. So yeah, that's kind of just my reasoning. Again, there's no one way to do it. There's no surefire way to attract bears. there's surefire ways to keep them away, right? Inconsistency, moldy bait, and stuff like that. Another thing to keep in mind is bears are picky. They're picky eaters. So that's one of the reasons I like the trail mix. Because I'll have bears come in and they'll, like one of them will pick out the chocolate covered pretzels. Like he'll sit down, he'll literally pick them out. Next guy will pick out the cashews. The other bear picks out the M&Ms. Right? Like they're picky eaters. They're like humans. They don't want the same thing all the time. And so when I'm baiting in spring with that in mind, like I said before, I order gummies. So I don't put the gummies in right away. I'll bait with always trail mix and peanut butter, always. And then I have my Northwoods bear products, and I don't douse. Once I have an established bait, I'm not terribly concerned about getting the scent out there, because they know it's there. They've been coming here it's established. They know it's here. So I just make sure that when they come, there's bait, and I basically all my contact points. So when I touch my barrel, I'll cover that. I'll spray a little bit on the ground and on the foliage and stuff like that, so the bears can track it. But basically, I'm just covering my own scent. I'm not broadcasting anymore. Once the bait's established, until it is established, then you want to douse, you want to spray, and get that scent strong and out there. There was something else I was gonna. Oh yeah, gummies. So I in spring I'll do the trail mix and the peanut butter. Once I notice, I just, as I'm in the bush baiting and throughout the weeks guiding, I just kind of pay attention to the foliage. And once I notice that berries are starting to come in, I get to the bait site and there's bear shit there and it's got berries in it. Okay, now I introduce my gummies, because I need to compete with that sugar. I need to compete with the sweetness that berries. So now I add that to my bait, right? Give them a reason to keep coming. And so, in spring they're looking to put the weight on. So I find there's a little more flexibility. In the fall, when I'm baiting in the fall, I'm baiting with the sole purpose of providing sustenance. They need calories, and they need lots of them, because they know that they're not going to get any for the foreseeable future. So that's where the peanut butter really comes in. That is like catnip for them. So I found that works. So in the spring, how can they put the calories back on, the weight back on quick? And when I'm baiting in the fall, I'm looking to give them something that has sustenance. If think of yourself, right? If you know you're going to go on a fast, or you're not going to eat for the next 3 days for whatever reason, and you had one last meal, it's not going to be popcorn, right? You're going to eat like a steak. You're going to eat some chicken breasts. You're going to eat, something hearty, something with sustenance that can tie you off. I think that is the. I mean, again, I could go into much more detail than that, but that is the gist of what it takes to get a bear bait started and to maintain a bear bait. Like I said, if there's anyone has any questions or comments, please down below, and I'll be happy to chat or address them or clarify or add on to anything. So yeah, that's the gist of bear baiting. I hope you gleaned at least something from it. I hope it helped you. I hope it makes you more successful in the bear woods. I wish you all the best, and stay safe in the big woods.